Welcome back everybody to our third concept for this week, relationships at school that matter. In our concept 7.1, we briefly mentioned a large-scale study involving primary and secondary students from across New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland. The research aimed to generate new knowledge about well-being in schools. We wanted to find out particularly how well-being is understood and how it's attended to in schools, including ways that we can improve that. The research was conducted in 3 phases. The first phase, we did an analysis of policy to see what policy highlighted for us about well-being and how well-being was situated in education and school education, particularly environments. In phase 2, we undertook some qualitative work. We interviewed 89 teachers and principals in schools, and we ran 67 student focus groups that involved over 700 students in both primary and secondary schools. In the third phase, we analysed the data from the second phase. We developed a survey in the third phase, and that was completed by 9,000 students and about 700 teachers. The study is still the largest in Australia to date to invite students' views about wellbeing in schools, and importantly to try and identify similarities and differences between how teachers see wellbeing and how students see wellbeing. And we wanted to know how these broadly align with current policy perspectives. A key finding from that research is that wellbeing at school is largely understood, experienced and facilitated within the context of relationships, relationship with self, their school, significant people inside school, significant people and institutions outside school, all emerged as being particularly important in helping or hindering student well-being. These were the relationships that students, secondary students in this case, identified as being important. And these are ranked in the order of importance. Just let you have a look at those for a moment. So again, what you're seeing here is a priority put on the importance of parents and carers for how well students perceive that they are at school. Although parents and family were also perceived by students as possibly hindering well-being when they do things like comparing students to their siblings, when their expectations are unrealistically high, when they are being overprotective, or when they're having too much influence on student values. We think it's notable too that students valued relationships with close friends and with other students above any relationships with teachers or adults at school. But in actual fact, teachers saw that quite differently. Teachers saw their role, they ranked it much more highly in terms of a relationship that would matter to students. Relationships within school include those with teachers, friends, peers, the principals and school counsellors. Features of these relationships that support student wellbeing were identified as caring, support, encouragement, talking, having fun, being kind, setting good examples, guidance, consistency and protection. Features of relationships in school that hinder student wellbeing were things like breach of trust or being yelled at or not being listened to, not being respected or being treated unfairly, receiving poor advice or being judged and criticised, being bullied and teased and not being supported. What's really interesting, though, is that in terms of their relationships with teachers, students describe their needs and desire to be known. So when we would ask students, what do you need at school when things get really tough? They would often respond with something like, a teacher who knows me and likes me. So they would say things like, it's important to be visible, that teachers know my name, that teachers know I am here, and it's about people not forgetting about you. So this idea about being known is really important. We call that attentive noticing, and teachers describe quite similar ideas. They would say things like, I don't think we can have any clue about well-being if we don't know a student well enough to realise, they're a bit down today, or they're a bit flat. They're really excited, or I wonder what's happening in their life. Or they'd say things like, he has flourished in this new school because his words are, I'm not invisible, they really know that I'm here. So this idea about the little things being the big things are really important. Very often, where we're focused in schools is the programs that we run, rather than the way that we go around our routine, everyday business in schools, where the little things really matter most. That includes opportunities for conversation. Students would describe having a conversation with a teacher as being quite foundational, critical to their well-being at school. Students often said, well, they just didn't want kind of one-off conversations with teachers, but opportunities and time for conversation. They didn't necessarily see that always being able to take place in classrooms. I mean, students are pretty realistic about these things, but whether it's an informal conversation on the way in the morning, on the playground, or anywhere else, they wanted conversations that were relational in nature. So those everyday relationships with teachers, 6 key themes emerged for how teachers help student well-being. These included caring for students, supporting and encouraging students, being someone to talk to, treating students as individuals, mentoring students, and teaching well. So all of these were identified by students as being really critical. And we asked students what those things look like and what they sound like in schools. So we'd often say, if I was a student in this school, how would I experience the kinds of things that you're describing under those 6 themes? And as I said before, students also identified a range of actions by teachers that hindered their well-being. Teachers are sometimes surprised, I think, certainly in terms of the response to the findings of this research, they were a little surprised at how things like raising your voice at a student, or a sense that a call that a teacher's made in response to something a student thought was not fair, they were quite surprised to see the way that does impact in a negative way on their well-being. If you'd like to read more about what students and teachers said about well-being in schools, these reports from the research are very readable. There are summary reports there, and they're available at the link that's indicated. You'll find in these reports a lot of rich data that describe the kinds of things that we've flagged to you in introducing this concept to you today.